Hello, and thank you for listening to Technology Simplified, tech talk everyone can understand. I am your host, Will Slappey, and today I am joined by Mike Romit of Valent Group. Mike serves as a vice president and the lead risk consultant for the property and casualty department of Valent Group. Mike's primary focus includes leading the property and casualty department in the analysis of risk and finding solutions for clients. Additionally, he serves as the practice lead for cyber liability and management liability. His experience includes structuring directors and officers' liability and cyber liability insurance programs for private and public companies, including into the Fortune 1000 ranks. Additionally, he is a frequent speaker and panelist on today's growing cyber threat exposure faced by every company. Interesting fact about Mike. Prior to his work in risk consulting, Mike was a Navy pilot and electronic warfare mission commander, receiving numerous medals for missions supporting Operation Southern Watch and Deliberate Forge. In 2018, Mike was honored by the Birmingham Business Journal as a veteran of influence in our community. Mike, we are so excited to have you join us as a guest today and to bring your wealth of knowledge and experience to our listeners.
Well, thank you very much, Will. I'm very happy to be here, and I love talking about cyber insurance. So thank you so much for the invite, and I'm ready to go.
Well, we appreciate you being here, and you mentioned cyber insurance, which is exactly what we want to pick your brain about. So why don't we just start, just for our listeners out there, a lot of people have heard of it, but not everybody has. So tell us, what is cyber insurance?
Sure. Well, cyber insurance, generally, when I refer to it in that way, it is meant more so for companies. In other words, not so much for an individual person to purchase a cyber policy. So this is meant for companies. Cyber insurance, just like you have insurance for operating an automobile, or you have insurance for your building in case there's a fire. Well, insurance is meant to provide you funds in case you get sued for something, or you experience some type of loss, an accidental loss. You're going to need money or funds to pay for that. Well, that's the intent of cyber. So eventually the question becomes, what is a cyber event? What do you mean? And that can mean a number of things, but I'll give three quick scenarios. One, we've heard in the news and media that companies, it seems to be left and right, are getting their systems frozen and held for a ransom by bad threat actors out of other countries, whether it's Russia or China or any other country, the Philippines. So your system gets shut down and you can't operate, which means you're going to have a loss of revenue. Well, a cyber insurance policy is going to come in to provide you lots of help, not just money, but lots of help and resources to help you through that cyber event, to get you back up and running, to pay off a ransom, that type of thing. It'll also pay to defend your company in case you were sued as a result of that breach. So let's say your company maintains a lot of data on individuals, personal data, addresses, account numbers. If that information gets breached and gets out into the general public and somebody becomes harmed because of it and decides to sue your entity, a cyber policy will defend you. So there are lots of ways that, lots of things that a cyber policy will respond to. And one that is not ultimately or commonly known is a paper breach. If you have lots of paper documents and maybe you put them in your dumpster and somebody went dumpster diving, or actually a great story was the tornado out of Joplin, I think, Missouri. It leveled a hospital. Well, they found patient documents hundreds of miles away. Well, that actually is a breach of protected health information, and a cyber policy would actually respond to help them in that case.
Yeah, so it almost sounds like it's almost like just information, which of course at the core of of any sort of cyber type issue is information technology. But that's an interesting little tidbit of it's really covering the information in whatever form it might be, whether it be over the web, whether it be in paper, whether it's on a thumb drive. somebody talking on the phone, whatever sort of scenario that the information is being taken, is being covered by, cyber. Of course, on the web is the number one place that I'm sure that it happens. But good to know that the cyber insurance has some other areas that it covers, protecting, helping you to protect that information wherever it may go. So that's an awesome little tidbit there. So you really kind of already answered this question, but anything else you would add to why cyber insurance is important for a business to have?
Sure. I have, over the years, over almost 2 decades, seen so many different types of breaches, and I've seen the development of both the insurance coverage, which is actually extremely broad. The insurance policies that are out there today are very, very broad, very responsive. I think I mentioned earlier that over the last 3 or 4 years, about 1 in 5 of my clients have had some sort of breach or cyber event. All of them had coverage, and each and every event was covered. So looking back, I think with the development of the bad actors and whatnot, the insurance has responded to get better. Let's go back just a little bit. What was, can you rephrase or restate your question?
I think I was just asking, why it was important for businesses to have it. And I think the answer that you gave me, and I don't know if this statistic would be true, but it sounds to me like that a business is more likely to need their cyber insurance policy than they are to need their general liability policy that they have. You're saying 1 in 5 versus, how many of your clients are using their general liability of any substance?
So that's a great point. So that's where I was going. Two points on that. I don't have the statistics to back this up, but I have the experience to back up the statement. You are more likely as an entity, as a company, you are more likely to have a cyber event than to have a fire at one of your locations. And yet you buy fire insurance. If you have a loan for your building, the bank requires you to buy fire insurance. But most likely you are more likely to have a cyber event than a fire. And number 2, the big differentiator is the number of arsons out there looking to burn down your building is minuscule compared to the number of, we are under attack every day. Every entity is out there. They are under attack from state actors like China and Russia and the Philippines. So in contrast to a fire insurance policy, there's not that many arsonists out there. It's not like all of Russia and China is trying to burn down our buildings, but they are trying to get into our system and get our information. So we're under attack. It's much more likely, and that is probably one of the major factors of why you should buy cyber insurance as a company.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that you said in the first question that I had not really thought about as much before, but the ongoing risk, if you have a cyber event, it's not a once and done. It's, hey, you could have ongoing risk down the road from anything that was compromised, and it could be years that you could be dealing with a single compromise from any of that, personal information that may get out because of that. So, it versus a fire or something, like if that does happen, the fire department comes, puts the water on it, gets it done, you get a contractor, you fix it, you're done, and you move on. And a cyber could go on for almost endlessly. So kind of moving, and you already begin to touch on this, but ransomware you talked about that as a common threat, and I know you have another name that y'all kind of use in the insurance world for that. But how do most policies handle ransom demands? Because I think that's the one that our listeners would be the most likely to know, right? They think about the pipeline or something along those lines and be like, yeah, somebody comes in, they hack your system, they lock your files, and then now they say, pay me $1 million or whatever the amount is, to get the key to it. So how does an insurance policy handle that ransom demand?
Okay. Well, another name for it is to which you alluded is cyber extortion. So you may see it either way, ransomware or cyber extortion on the actual insurance policy. The biggest bullet point is it will actually pay the ransom demand. So, if it's in Bitcoin, there are vendors out there that the breach coach that is hired by the insurance company, the breach coach and the vendor will figure out how to actually pay the bad actors, pay the ransom. And an interesting note about that, it fluctuates sort of year to year. About three to 4 years ago, about 90% of the times when you actually paid the ransom, you got all your information back. Very fascinating. That number has dropped slightly over the last couple of years to about 70 to 75%. But and it's not funny, but I tend to joke that these guys, these bad actors must get together in some country to have a convention, and so everybody agrees, look, you got to give them information back or else they're going to stop paying the ransom, because they do. So more than...
Do they have like an escrow agent that holds the money until it's...
until everything clears?
There probably is going to be a business in that. I bet there's going to be some other bad actor that says, I'm going to be the escrow agent that always 100% of the time makes sure that you get your information back. So use me, and I can make, but it's the sad world we live in these days.
It is, but it's a business. It is a global business. And we mentioned earlier before the podcast that you can purchase ransomware software around the globe that comes with 24/7, 365 support and a contract. It is insane. So you can actually buy this stuff off the shelf with customer support. So it'll pay the demand. One of the other things, though, that is very interesting, the breach coaches that come along with an insurance policy are almost always a law firm. This is important because your communications with that breach coach are then become privileged. Okay. And that's an important aspect. Plus, they've handled thousands of breaches, I will say. In the process of handling an extortion event, they will actually negotiate with the bad actors. And quite often they can negotiate the amount of ransom down. So a lot of that happens behind the scenes. And if you don't have an insurance policy, if you're trying to do this on your own, it's going to be a nightmare. But these companies have already gone through it so many times. They actually have repeated interactions with certain bad actors. So the breach coach will handle that ransomware event for you.
I think that's a really good point, Mike, because I remember probably about a decade or so ago, when the tornadoes came through Alabama and we had some property damage. And, the insurance adjuster was hugely helpful of walking us, not only, of course, getting the money to fix things to the property, but also just walking us through how to do that. And, I hadn't thought about that as much, but that, not only having the financial piece covered for you, but also bringing in the team of people that is able to come alongside you to help you through an incredibly difficult time for business. So, really good added point that you've got there. Go ahead. You wanted to jump in with something else?
I was going to say, when I talk to my clients and or prospects, if they do not purchase cyber, I tell them the number one best thing about purchasing a policy is access to the breach coach. The money is great, the backup, the financial backup, but when everything hits the fan and you're in panic mode, you're going to be able to talk with somebody that has gone through this so many times. They're going to make you feel much better, and they're going to be much more efficient at it.
Yeah, for sure. And it's all covered under attorney-client privilege, so gives you some good liability protection there as well. So, we've talked about some of the things that are covered. What are the risks that are not covered by, a cyber insurance policy, that if somebody's going out and getting something that maybe they think, oh, I got all this coverage and I'm good to go, but then they end up down the road all of a sudden thinking they have coverage and not? What are those pitfalls to be aware of?
Okay. So first, a general statement, and I said it before, most of the cyber policies today are extremely broad. And not all policies are like that. You can get property policies that are kind of narrow or basic in coverage. Depending on which insurer you have. If you step up to more of a mainline insurance company that a well-known name, usually the coverages for property are better. That's not necessarily the case in the cyber world. Most of the policies, and I've seen most of the forms out there, there's about I'll say 25 to 30 really good name insurance. And these will be insurance companies that you've never heard of, but that's okay, because there's a lot that are very good that you've never heard of before. But most of the policies are extremely broad. Now, they will cover most of the costs associated with a breach. Some of the things that they will not cover is the two main things that come to mind, well, three, is like a broad internet outage. If there's a broad internet outage and all of Birmingham is shut down, you're going to lose some business. Well, they don't really intend to pay for that. The insurance is meant for you and your event. Or if you're a company, which is common, maybe a smaller company, which if you outsource your IT and your IT system and your software as a service to a third party, you can get your insurance will cover if they're shut down. So that's good. So again, it covers a bunch, but a broad internet or a broad power outage are things that look, we don't intend to cover a mass event. Okay. So those are two. And then one of the most common exclusions almost on every policy is war or invasion or insurrection, something like that. Now, outside of that, most insurance policies cover a wide range of things. And I'll give you just a couple examples. Depending on what type of company you are, if you have an event and you lose revenue because you can't operate for 2 weeks, it will actually pay you your lost revenue. So it pays for business interruption. It will pay to restore some of your systems, your hardware and your software if they were destroyed. So it's going to have some first party costs in there that are covered. Again, these things cover a wide range of things. Now, two areas I want to mention are social engineering fraud. This is the typical claim where somebody pretends to be the CFO or the CEO of a company. They know because they see on your Facebook page that the CEO is on a flight out to Utah to go skiing with his family. All of a sudden, the controller or CFO gets an email from the CEO saying, "Hey, you need to wire $90,000. This is a bank account. We're late. We're on our 90-day AR." And it's from the CEO. Why am I going to question it? Well, sure. They've been tricked. Most cyber policies may or will offer a sublimit for social engineering fraud. So if you buy, generally speaking, $1 million policy, it's not going to give you $1 million worth for that type of event. They're going to sublimit it to maybe 100,000 because it's so prevalent and it's so effective. So there are areas that they may not give you the full $1 million, they'll give you less. That is one area. The next thing that I have to add, and this is maybe the most crucial point of our conversation. Because of the loss events over the last 2 to 3 years, the cyber insurance market prices have gone through the roof. Matter of fact, last fall, 1 in 5 insurance renewals had over 100% increase in premium. The reason is there was so much competition, they were pricing this stuff too low. And as an industry, as insurance industry, their losses exceeded what they were charging. So premiums went up, deductibles went up, that type of thing. Underwriting became much more scrutinized. And right now, if you're a company and you don't have multi-factor authentication across all of your systems, meaning essentially email and remote access to your system, like if I operate out of Florida and I want to tie into my system, there better be MFA backup, and that also, or an MFA implementation. That also goes to your backups. They need to have some sort of MFA prevention device. MFA is very important right now. Along with that is EDR, endpoint detection and response, right? If you don't have MFA across the board, you may not get insurance at all. There's only like 1 to 2 insurers that will consider your account if you don't have MFA. And if you're in healthcare or banking or something with a lot of personal data, you're probably not going to get insurance. So implementing MFA now is very important. If you don't have MFA implemented, they may not offer any sublimit for ransomware, okay, or for social engineering fraud. So the underwriting process and your controls in place kind of dictate what's going to be offered to you.
Yeah. So Mike, I know, because obviously we help with companies from time to time, our customers who will have, somebody like yourself that will be giving them a form to fill out, and they're going through it and saying, yeah, do you have MFA? Do you have EDR, et cetera? So one of the questions that I see on those forms is, have you ever been denied coverage by somebody before? So kind of where I would head with that is, if you have somebody who doesn't have something simple like MFA in place, and then, to your point, hey, there's a really high chance they're going to get denied. As long as you said one carrier that would even do it. So let's assume they get denied. And then now, does that kind of create like this negative cycle where then the next application they have to say, I've gotten denied before, and then now they become under, more scrutiny? I mean, is that a call to say, hey, make sure that you get, with a company to kind of get your act together before, applying for cyber insurance, so that way you can answer yes or no to, obviously whatever the better answer is on those applications, the first time, or does that not really matter?
Great question. And the question about being denied, those are usually associated with a specific industry form, which we refer to as an accord policy. Many or several cyber insurance applications actually may not ask that question. But if they do, I, as a broker, would inform my client to say, yes, cyber market, extremely difficult, many denials, period. Then what I do as a broker, when I submit that application, I mean, all of my clients, all of them have had denials. I mean, lots of denials. So it's common. I mean, yeah, it's like, look, London, basically there's a market, I'll say it that way, out of London. They are non-renewing any account that generates over 50 million in revenue. They don't want to have anything to do with it. So they're going to get a denial. That's where your broker should come in handy and say, look, this is how you should respond to that question. Plus, when I turn in the application, I'm going to provide a narrative of all the controls you do have in place. The fact that, guess what, you plan to be within 2 months MFA compliant across the board. If you don't paint that picture for them to the insurance company, then you're going to get a flat out denial. So that's where it really comes down to the broker working with the insured, saying, tell me about your systems. I have one of my clients is a fairly sizable university, and university and school systems typically have an open architecture because of the nature of what they do for students to have access, parents and whatnot. So I had to get a full narrative. We had several conversations with their IT department to understand which servers were logical, which servers were actually on base, what's in the cloud, what, where is MFA preventing, who has access to what, is it credentials only? There were multiple conversations that I had to go through to get just one quote, the only company that would quote, to get them cyber. So the fact that a company might be getting denials on cyber shouldn't be a worry. But what should be handled in the meantime is, tell us about your controls and your plans to implement MFA and EDR.
Yeah. Well, and not to toot your own horn, because, we've used you guys and helped a number of y'all's clients, but one of the things I know our team has always appreciated about working with Valiant Group is that, you guys understand the cyber insurance world and can help to articulate that story upstream, where we've had, some brokers that we've dealt with that have not seemed to know exactly what's going on, and I'm not sure if they're painting the best picture for their client. So, certainly, whether somebody wants to use Valiant Group or somebody else, but I would say from the IT professional side of things, making sure that you have a broker who actually deals with cyber insurance regularly is an important part of, positioning yourself versus, the generalist who maybe doesn't deal with it as much and doesn't understand the nuances like you're talking about here with, hey, this is how to position it and word this to make sure that you can put yourself in the same, position. Now, on the point of the application, while we're on it, because one of the things that I've, really heard stories of this and kind of love to hear your take on it, where, people, whether they lied or they thought they had something that they didn't, however it came about, but they check, yes as a box or no on a box. And then it turns out later that was not true. They thought they had MFA and they check yes. And then, maybe they had MFA on one of their systems, but not another one, whatever. And it turns out that, that box wasn't checked correctly. And then now we're in a cyber event and there's, investigation. Walk me through what happens if you fill out that form incorrectly and don't know it, and or maybe you do know it, but down the road when all of a sudden you have a breach, and then how often does an insurance company go back and go to that form, and what happens in that scenario?
Okay, man, excellent question, and it's very timely because historically, what I've seen is claims adjusters traditionally have not gone back to look at the application. A breach happens, they tell you, okay, what happened? Why did this happen? But we just now, in the last several months, have seen insurers starting to look at the application in the event of a claim. And there was one that was denied by a well-known insurer because the insured had checked that MFA was installed across the board, and in fact, it was not. And it was a proximate cause and contributing factor to the loss, and they denied the claim. So they are starting to tie that in, which is not really common for, I'll say, the claims / underwriting side of the house. Insurance companies are huge. When you talk about underwriting, it's not like underwriting and claims are sitting right next to each other saying, well, this is what he told me. They hardly ever, don't always talk, but in this case, they are starting to look. And it's an important fact especially with what we call management liability, directors and officers, employment practices, fiduciary, almost any professional liability policy, the application actually becomes legally, physically part of the insurance contract. That is different from property insurance. When you fill out a property, or we fill out a property insurance application for our insureds and turn it in, it's not part of the insurance contract. But on the cyber side, it can and usually is, and especially with other professional, like our agency purchases errors and omissions, professional liability. What we fill out on that application becomes a warranty. It says we are doing this. So yes, it is important, very much important on cyber applications or management liability applications to make sure that you answer to the best of your knowledge and provide an accurate picture.
Yeah. That's good to know. And probably, that's why you need a good broker in place. You need somebody good on the technology side, whether that be somebody in-house or, external that's helping you to make sure you understand. Some people may think they know what MFA is, but you may want to have an outside expert make sure that you do understand what that is and that you have it in place. So really good information there. Last question here before we tap out. What kind of information, if somebody is like, okay, yeah, I know I need some cyber insurance, and maybe they heard some stuff here today that had gotten them more interested in that. What kind of information will they need to get started on getting some coverage, and who should they reach out to?
So probably in most cases, they should reach out to their current agent or broker. Let them know that, hey, we want to at least get some quotes, or see where we fall within the spectrum of cyber insurance and what it might cost us, what would be covered, where we're exposed. We will, have a conversation with your broker and say, look, I have three retail storefronts. I sell donuts. Do I even need cyber? Is that do I need that? And the case may be no, but guess what? If you're a simple donut shop and all you do is take credit cards, okay. And let me mention one thing about that in a minute, but they have a very low exposure, so the premium is going to be very low. It might be $1,000 to $1,500 for $1 million policy. The exposure is low. But have a conversation with your broker and your agent, and they will get an application. Usually they'll think about what you do and your controls in place, and they'll probably send you the most likely application from the insurer that is most likely to write you. And they should either help you out or let you take a stab at it first. And then there's lots of questions that are not intuitive for an insurance buyer. And that's where we'll get on the phone with our client or prospect and say, okay, leave it blank. Leave it blank, because in my email, this is what I'm going to say. Because it's not always a yes or no answer. So coordinate with filling out an application. If it's the first time you're buying cyber, the application is all they need. They will get it out to a number of markets and start getting responses. Generally speaking, with a completed application, you can expect to get quotes in within 5 business days, 5 to 8 business days. I say that I will say that the insurance world is moving a lot more slower these days for a variety of reasons. We are in a hard market, just to let everybody know. I've been in the business almost 2 decades, and we are truly in a hard market. Insurance rates are going through the roof. Property is out of control. Cyber is out of control. Although I will say, on a positive note, that cyber rates have seemed to started to level off within the last 3 or 4 months. That's good news for all our buyers. One last thing, and I have a slide deck if you ever want to see it, but because I speak a lot. Lots of smaller companies think because they outsource their IT to a third party and their POS system or their credit card charging, oh, well, we outsource that. If they have a breach, it's not our fault. Maybe so. But by almost every state law in the country, that retail or that entity is responsible for that data, not the third party. So if you're selling stuff and your third party has a breach, you're responsible for the notification by almost every state law in our country. So I call it the outsourced fallacy. Just because you outsource it doesn't mean you're not responsible. And if you don't have an insurance policy, you're going to be hurting. Now, the outsourced third party should have a policy that will help, but again, it ultimately falls to you.
Right. Well, and they're obviously, they have their own best interest in that case to defend. And I think the biggest thing that I would take away from the conversation for our listeners is it's worth having a conversation with a professional and getting their assessment and understanding how your business operates to figure out what you need. And if you are limited exposure, it may not cost a lot, in which case it may be worth having for that rare instance that it does happen. So a lot of really good information. Mike, we're probably going to have you come on again sometime, because I can tell from the conversation that there's a whole lot more to talk about on this subject. And I know it's interesting for a lot of people. So maybe in a few more months, we can have you back on and bring your slide deck and dive into some more information. So, but for today, that's all the time that we have here on Technology Simplified. Thank you for listening to all of our listeners out there. Thanks, Mike, for being our special guest today from the Valiant Group. Thanks for sharing your knowledge of cyber insurance and cyber threats. Please join us next time. We'll be taking a look at business phone systems, how they have evolved over the years, and some of the options available. Make sure to follow Technology Simplified to help you keep your business technology running efficiently, securely, and productively. Have a great week, everyone.